of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Right now, it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to Time for Hemp all around the world on Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, iHeartRadio. Anywhere there is sound found on the internet, we are found around the internet. Please share us with your friends. It is Wednesday, and on Wednesday we put a spotlight on the amazing people at LEAP Law Enforcement Against Prohibition with my fantastic joint host, Judge Lenny Frieling. Good morning, Your Honor.
Casper, as always, my honor to be here. And today we have Richard Newton. Richard Newton special. And I'm going to do a little bit of leading questioning, part of my day job, and give you an idea of why I say Richard Newton is special. Richard, you have a background, and I'm thinking initially both military and law enforcement related, that went on for quite some time. How?
I'm sorry. I spent 11 years on active duty in the Marines in the 1970s and early 1980s, and then I spent 22 years with U.S. Customs trying to keep those evil drugs out of this country. Great job, but really didn't work.
If prohibition worked, if it got rid of dangerous drugs, leaving only what's regulated, that would be dreamland. Now, is it fair to say that in over 3 decades of federal government work, doing everything you and the rest of your teams were capable of to stop the flood, the supply of drugs like cocaine, heroin, and the like, with all that work, 3 decades over on your part, did it work?
No, not at all. The biggest load I was involved in down in Puerto Rico, 1995 or so, 1,000 keys of pure street cocaine, figured an estimated value of about $80 to $100 million. Didn't raid. We seized it. Happened to be being smuggled in by the police to make a little extra money. And it didn't raise, as far as we know, and as far as the intelligence people could tell us, it didn't raise, after we caught it, the price of cocaine on the streets in San Juan and Miami didn't go up by a penny. So right there tells you how ineffectual it is.
I'm looking at the numbers just real quickly, and we can say 100 kilograms. We can say 1,000 kilograms.
Actually, it was 1,000 kilograms. I'm sorry if I said 100.
No, you did not. You did not. I was choosing words poorly. 1,000 kilos, if we get close enough for horseshoes, that is a ton. It's actually 200 pounds over a ton of cocaine. And you're telling us you took a ton of cocaine off the street. Did it raise the street price?
No, that's what I'm saying, not by 1 penny, as far as our intelligence people told us.
Did it cut off supply for a week, a month, a year?
No, I doubt it. This was how target-rich, when I was, Puerto Rico itself is only 350 to 400 miles from Colombia. So if you get the stuff to Puerto Rico, you've got it into the United States. That's why Puerto Rico was such and is such a good target for smuggling. But trying to cut stuff off or stop people from using drugs by catching stuff, Customs catches 10%. So that, since I caught 1,000 keys, I strongly suspect about 9,000 keys got through it in about the same time frame. You know, That's the government statistics.
I am never speechless. I have to say, that's a lot of cocaine. And you're saying 9,000 keys in an hour, in a week, in a month?
Well, whatever instant. I mean, like I said, overall, the U.S. government says they catch maybe 10% at the outside of the illicit drugs coming across the border.
I see. So they I don't know if this is a good analogy or not, but I'll bet they catch more Cuban cigars coming in than they're catching.
Yeah, and as long as people take the wrappers off of those, actually, Customs doesn't really care.
No.
I'm just telling you from experience living in the Caribbean for 5 years in the mid-'90s with Customs.
And we know you're speaking for yourself personally and not as a customs agent or former customs agent. This is called the defense attorney in me making sure my clients' butts are covered. You were flying. It's an understatement.
Both. Go ahead.
Tell me about what you were flying, where you were flying.
We flew everything from citation jets, which were designed to when the Colombians or whoever were smuggling drugs by small aircraft in the late 80s, flying citation jets with F-16 radar and infrared on it. We flew, I flew Black Hawk helicopters, smaller helicopters, and then later on, we got an anti-submarine turboprop from Australia, and you could see really small boats with it at night. Just everything and everything.
So if you wanted to, it sounds like your team could have taken over a small country and not had to launch all your resources.
Well, they probably could have. I will say that after a lot of us retired from U.S. Customs, we ended up flying mercenary missions in Iraq and Afghanistan for a contractor for the U.S. government for a pretty penny, because we already had these skills that we needed to do that kind of thing.
Like being able to fly a helicopter.
Yeah, or fly at night on night vision goggles or that kind of thing, which is a different skill set.
That caught my attention. Flying at night, night vision goggles, was that something that you experienced, that you flew both?
Yeah, that was routine. We'd routinely fly with lights out so the bad guys wouldn't know we were coming. After around night vision goggles first started appearing in cockpits in the military in the early 80s, so we became very good at it with U.S. Customs. And then after I left the Caribbean, of course, I've been out here in El Paso and, flying along the Mexican-U.S. border. 2 o'clock in the morning, a small helicopter 50 feet off the ground looking for smugglers.
Let me ask this. In your military career, did you ever run into situations where you were doing flight training other pilots to be?
Well, I trained a lot of new pilots with Customs who didn't have quite the skills because maybe I was 10 or 15 years older. And so, yeah, and even in the military, you train younger people, junior people. That's just an ongoing thing, and you yourself continue training. The skills are never finalized.
No, once you know it all, then you scare me.
Well, that's when you retire, or that's when you're dead, one or the other.
Oh, man, there you go. And it was manipulative in a fair way. Here's why I ask. What I am hearing is that in order to effectuate a guaranteed failed policy of prohibition, we take a resource that, a little bit of hyperbole, but not much, when push came to shove, could have a significant impact on saving many lives, whether it's in a Russian satellite being taken over where pilots need to be trained, whatever it is. We take a valuable resource, and in order to stop the flow of, say, cocaine, knowing it won't work, we have them flying 25 feet above ground at night, relying on electronics. Maybe I'm wrong, but that sure sounds like high-risk flight to me.
Well, it pretty much is. I mean, aviation in general is one of the highest risk professions out there. And then you throw in the law enforcement side of it with customs. I mean, we've been shot at. We had a guy that tried to ram our helicopter with his airplane. We've had, we've got stories. And luckily, no one so far. The pilots on the customs or the government side seem to be a little bit better because they can always sit back and say, we'll come after this guy after he quits being crazy or something like that, But yeah, I mean, honestly, I spent 8 years here before I retired. I live on the southwest border, flying the New Mexico border in a small helicopter at 25 to 50 feet at night under NBGs at 2 o'clock in the morning. And believe me when I tell you, I know where the power lines are because you can't see power lines on NBGs.
It sounds like flying a high-performance crop duster, but oops, forgot to wait till the sun came up.
Oh
man. And so the level of equipment, money, skill in people power, applying all of that time, energy into training someone and then steering them and applying them to this kind of use. It's so obviously insane that it's hard to overstate. You work for 3 decades, okay? More than that. If I said to you, Richard, with all your experience, all your training, if we gave you and everybody you ever can train and everyone they can ever train, if we gave you another 32 years, would that be enough? Could Prohibition work then? We'd have better equipment.
No. I mean, come on, we don't change people's behavior with law. We really don't. I mean, you can change people's behavior with other things, like cigarette smoking is now, half as popular as it used to be, and we didn't put anybody in jail and all that other stuff. But just passing a law, I mean, how long the government tried to stamp out, my favorite is something called the numbers game. It was gambling. Suddenly we woke up one day and there were no problems with the numbers game anymore. It was called Lotto, but we're still doing the exact same thing. So, again, regulate it, legalize it, and tax it, and we'll continue on from there, Go ahead.
I was just visiting a facet of what appeared to be a well-regulated group of businesses. I got to visit, just over the line from Rhode Island into Connecticut, the Mohican Casino. On the one hand, what a cool casino. On the other hand, the artwork that was in there, the whole thing, I hope I don't get in too much trouble for this, it put Vegas to shame. Now, what point was I making? Regulated competition, regulated industry, it works fine. It works fine in Colorado, where it's regulated, where other adult activities are regulated. And I love this example. Kid walks down to the corner, sees his friendly neighborhood drug dealer, pick your drug, and says, I'd like to buy some of that illegal underground drug, please, sir. And, of course, the street dealer, the very next thing you would hope they would say would be, well, son, may I see your ID first? It never happened. It never will happen. I can't buy a joint, and I'm 65 years old. I can't buy a joint in a local store that knows me on sight. They've caught me twice with expired driver's licenses, which, of course, they did not honor. They said, go fix it or bring a passport. Regulation at work. They're not guessing, they're checking. It's a safer system. It takes it out of the underground. To take more out of the underground, more states need to be on board. We need to eliminate. Just as Richard, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but I do get a tad passionate, as you two may know. But just as Richard is saying, this won't work. Richard, what does keeping it illegal, if you have an impression, what does it do to the price?
Well, since I live about 2 miles from the Mexican border, and for a couple of years I was living about 5 miles from the most violent city on earth, you see it out Juarez. What keeping it illegal does is keeps the money up, and it keeps the cartels and the criminals in charge of it. Because it can't cost more to grow marijuana than it does to grow tobacco. And as far as I know, the last time the guys in the tobacco industry had a shooting war, well, it didn't happen.
I understand that tomatoes and mushrooms can also be quite valuable as crops. 2 miles from the Mexican border, Juarez, visions of Spike Lee making his next movie and it being really good for all the right and wrong reasons. What was that like? What obviously it had impact on you.
Well, I'll tell you what's really strange, and you can tell me why. El Paso is 1 million people. It's a population of 1 million people, and according to FBI statistics, it is the safest large city in the United States. So you tell me why. I mean, it's Donald Trump wants to build that wall, and I'm kind of wondering why. Because again, here we live with I have friends in Mexico right across the Rio Grande. Hell of a lot safer in this town than places like Chicago, Denver, New York, or just about any other city you can name. But you step across into Juarez, and this is not so much now. This was more about 3 or 4 years ago. They had the highest murder rate of any city on earth, and that included Kabul and Baghdad. And as far as I know, those murder rates for one gang shooting another gang to control who's going to get to smuggle all the marijuana and drugs to the gringos, because our demands are the highest in the world, even though, hey, we're going to keep it illegal and keep the war on drugs going, although that doesn't work. Again, so safest city, El Paso is the safest city in the United States. Juarez, for a while, was the most dangerous, and people unfortunately died, and most of it, I think, had to do basically with the control of who was going to sell us the drugs, who was going to control that very lucrative market.
Question: is it possible that part of the picture of El Paso's safety is the proliferation of everything from federal law enforcement to state to local to civilian vigilante? Is that showing any impact that you saw?
No, I don't think that shows here. Do you really want to know why I think El Paso is so safe?
I do. Yeah,
I think that it's because all the cartel members know that if they commit crimes in Mexico, a homicide committed in Mexico only has a 2% chance of even being investigated. So why not do all the nasty stuff on the south side of the river and live on the north side of the river? That's what I think.
Although some big
you can claim that drugs have caused corruption and stuff in our government officials, and it's possibly slightly true. But there is a systemic corruption that occurs in Mexico that does not occur in the United States. And that's just the way it is. I mean, they literally don't pay their policemen a living wage. So that's why you have things like muerta and mordita, greasing the palm, so forth and so on. There's literally not a living wage built into Mexican law enforcement's salaries. So, that's why I think. I think it's because the bad guys realize if they commit the crimes on the south side of the river, the odds are they won't be investigated, and if they are investigated, a little bit of money will go to cure it. Whereas you cannot say that specifically in the United States.
With 4 decades of criminal defense under my belt, from what I have seen, and I'm not working in a city famous for graft, I have seen virtually zero. Not zero, but not that often. And I have to assume we know that's not the case in Mexico. It very well might not be the case further south also. How can it be? How can it be?
I saw Vicente Fox, the former president of Mexico during the early part of President Bush's term,
yes,
on TV here recently. And he, of course, is for legalizing all drugs, not just marijuana. And the TV host asked him why, and he's like, it's freedom. With responsibility comes freedom, and with freedom comes responsibility. And I really like him. He's a good guy.
It frustrates me that when somebody says something that is so classically Republican, so clearly correct, that party has drifted so far from states' rights, individual decision and responsibility, small government. It's I'm going to justify it. The subject is related because if Republican meant what it once meant, I'm told that's referred to as an Eisenhower Republican, they would certainly be 100% on board the LEAP platform. And you and I and Casper, Richard, have all met what might be called a old school true Republican, who, for just those reasons, fiscal responsibility, is in favor of it. Last thing I'm going to say, and we're going to switch back. I think I understand what can be learned from the Donald. My opinion. One, when you listen to him, ours is not to ask why. That has nothing to do with what he's saying. I don't think he cares about the why or the how. Listen and learn from his style. And when I finish watching his acceptance speech, the next thing I'm going to do is pull my college speech textbook off the shelf and reread one of Hitler's speeches to see if, in fact, they appeal to the same emotional food, clothing, shelter needs that did work in the past. I can't even imagine how many hours of flying and getting to the level of flying helicopters, aside from what I think we all agree, at least 3 of us agree, a failed attempt at drug supply interdiction. Did any good stuff happen? Did you get to rescue any people off sinking sailing yachts?
Actually, yeah, I was at Customs and myself. We were at Katrina for a month after, in New Orleans for a month to 2 months after the hurricane occurred. Customs actually flies a very, very large aircraft called a P-3. It's an anti-submarine vehicle that is used for, we have AWACS, a big radar dome on it that we can see a couple hundred miles. We use that to control all of the helicopters helping out at Katrina, you know. So, yeah, the U.S. government, I did airspace security after 9/11, protecting the nation's capital. We were somewhere between doing absolutely nothing and shooting the plane down with an F-16. So, I have pulled people off of mountains and other things and deserts. And believe it or not, one of the big reasons that the Border Patrol and Customs were like in southern Arizona in the summer, back in 08, 09, was for search and rescue of all the illegals that were walking across that 150 miles of desert where it's 125 degrees Fahrenheit. We picked up people. We picked up Mexicans. That's why we were there. So, yeah, there was good stuff to do with this job. It was fun, of course, to catch 1,000 kilos of cocaine. Believe me, and I did some stuff out of Miami Vice early in my career in the Caribbean. But
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you didn't come out and say, and there was the Miami Vice element, and that was exciting, fun stuff. If you didn't see that in it, that doesn't. No,
I saw that. I mean, the government gave me a gun, a badge, and a helicopter and a jet, and I worked from Colombia to Canada, so it was a pretty good deal.
What I'm thinking is, on the one hand, doing all that regular patrolling, adding all those hours, doing similar, I imagine, kind of behavior in flight as search and rescue would be, made you more effective when it was search and rescue. What I'm wondering is, why not adjust the focus and think about legitimate Homeland Security kinds of issues, legitimate keeping an eye on the ports. I know when I leave with a cruise ship now, there's a Coast Guard vessel out there with machine guns, and I suspect, I hope, they're loaded. I could see keeping you in shape while perhaps doing more good. You were saying?
Well, yeah, I mean, the emphasis, the Customs set up its aviation force for drug interdiction. That was the main reason we were set up back in the mid-'80s. But after 9/11 and stuff, I mean, I've had a Black Hawk at the Super Bowl. I myself have spent a couple days up at the Balloon Fest each year in Albuquerque, patrolling with the Black Hawk or a smaller helicopter to be there in case something did go on. So, yeah, I patrolled, did Washington, D.C. protection for a couple years in the Black Hawk. And one night I was flying around the Capitol during the State of the Union address. So we did stuff like that. And we still do it, although, again, the main reason Customs set up its aviation force was to prevent smuggling by small aircraft. But there are other law enforcement collateral duties, from serving warrants to surveillances to search and rescue even. So we did do all that.
So I very well may be not out of line. I may be right on when I'm saying that if the resources were applied to everything you've listed, except drug interdiction, it would be a useful adjustment of resources.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because there's enough reasons in law enforcement to have, some besides just drug interdiction. And I also kind of wonder, I'll tell you a quick, we were back when I was a year out of the law enforcement training. And this kind of says, I'm not sure how strongly people are actually against even the people, the agents, we're sworn and we do it. We were coming off a base in Tampa after an operation, and right next to us there were four special agents in the car with us, and right next to us in the next car were about 3 young airmen, and they were obviously toking on a joint, and we were stop-and-go traffic, and we pulled up next to him, and all the guy that was driving our car did, he raised his badge, he flashed it at him, and he shook his finger at him and drove away. Now, back in those days, the military, and they're still very serious about drugs, that could have screwed up the careers of those 3 young guys. Probably their whole life, actually, would have been a felony, equivalent of a felony. So even then, the guys, and these guys have been doing this customs job for 10 or 15 years, you know, things, all your federal people, I guess what I'm saying is federal people, we are human. And there's, yes, we would like, if in a perfect world, people wouldn't do drugs. But this is not a perfect world, so let's accept the reality and see if we cannot minimize the damage of drug usage.
In all fairness, let's look at the other side of just that piece, because we're so used to looking at it the way you just said, and there's truth to it. You think the 3 young gents in the car were pilots?
No, I know they were not. They were enlisted Air Force.
Here's where I was going with that. We would agree that professional football players fall within the group of the best athletes on the planet. We would agree that there are some swimmers, Olympic, for example, that are in the very small group of the 1, 2, or 3 best swimmers on the planet. Now, is somebody going to tell me because some of those people smoke pot that they can't be the best? Is somebody going to say, well, you know, maybe they could be better? Well, maybe, or maybe not. It's no secret, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but it's sure no secret that for years, and I'm more comfortable saying this about World War II and Vietnam, the government supplied pilots, I would argue appropriately, with amphetamines for long missions to keep them alert. So even what many of us know is a dangerous drug may not be an inherently evil drug, and it may well have its uses. So it's like the government issuing a patent on a cannabinoid and then saying it has no medical use if you ask down the hallway. Well, either methamphetamine has a use, the amphetamines either have a legitimate use, or they don't. Maybe a little use, maybe an unusual use. But it's kind of a yes or no thing on how the feds treat it. Right now, we have 50 states. How many of those states can look at what we're attempting to do, working on and doing in Colorado, and make up their own minds? When you were working, doing it, what, Richard, when you were working and at the time believing you were doing a good thing for our country, can I fairly say you weren't protecting one state more than another?
Yeah, that's correct.
You were protecting the United States, wherever they assigned you, but you weren't protecting North Carolina. My point is, part of what you are doing is protecting the mission, protecting the United States, protecting the purpose of it. The problem is the efforts, the resources, not being projected in a way that can achieve that goal. Am I talking reality here?
Yes.
Oh, why is that not reassuring? Maybe it is. You mentioned the drug crime link. We've talked about that. And we're going through that stage. I only read this one time on an alert, that the wholesale price, this is a year ago now, the wholesale price of marijuana coming up through Mexico had dropped in half. attributed to marijuana legalization in places in the U.S. In Colorado, our highway fatality rate is the lowest it's ever been. Underage drug usage is down. And these are government numbers. And the government has not yet told me the sky is falling. I don't know that I'd believe them, but I'd look up. So where do we go from here? What do we do to help? I mean, you and I are speakers for LEAP and had to be prior law enforcement. What about my neighbor who was never law enforcement? What can he be a LEAP supporter? Can he sign up at leap.cc?
Oh, yeah, he should. And then where should we go? We got an election in November.
Talk to me.
Gary Johnson in the Libertarian Party, but even the main issue itself is becoming mainstream. Last time, here in Texas, the University of Texas at Houston and UT Austin did a survey about 2 years ago, and they say 67% of all Texans want drug laws modified.
My impression as a Coloradan, and this is certainly politically incorrect, I'm sure, but my image of a Texan is somebody that's more apt to make up their own mind, to be more perhaps independent, which I think is true of Coloradans compared to many states. May not be true, but it's certainly part of my image of how a Texan may perceive themselves. I make up my own mind, and I'll listen to anything, and then I will make up my own mind. Sound familiar?
Well, yeah, I guess.
No, it's okay to tell me, Lenny, you're just wrong, except on this show we say it this way. Casper, you're just wrong. It's the code we have, special code.
I've heard that since I was a kid. I'm used to it.
So, Richard, tell me how it is, not how I think it is. I'd rather know how it is.
Well, again, you ask where we should go. I think as a population, we should start voting much stronger issue. I mean, it's not the only issue out there, but it's an important one, obviously. I know I'm going for Gary Johnson this fall. I wish there were more ways, more people running. I happen to luck out in the fact that my representative here is Beto O'Rourke, who is somewhat well known in the drug legalization movement.
Question. The way it appears to me at the moment, Hillary looks best in the numbers. I could be wrong, but at least at the moment. Let's assume it was a really, really, really close race, and somebody could look you in the eye and say, your vote for Ralph Nader, your vote for Gary Johnson, absolutely is a vote for Trump. What do? Do you vote your conscience, or do you make that defensive sacrifice pawn and vote against the Trump because one vote? Let me tell you why one vote matters. Livingston High School. My cousin ran for class senior president. She lost. She lost by one vote to another guy in her class named, the rest of the story, Chris Christie. My point, one vote counts.
Well, and it does. One vote does count. My mom was a politician, and she ended up being the first female president of the county council in our hometown. And during the time, she was one of the first females to even run for public office. And 1 year, she and another member who was running for the same office tied. And because of that, they split the term between them. Oh. And then on another year, my mother lost by 2 votes. One would have tied it. One would have won it. And so it is very, very important. But also about whether or not are you throwing your vote towards Donald Trump if you vote for Hillary Clinton. Well, let's see. We already know from the polls that 42% of the population is going to vote for Hillary and 42% of the population is going to vote for Donald Trump. And only 3% are voting for the female candidate. I can't think of her name. And about 9% are voting for Gary Johnson at the most. So you can look at the statistics and say to yourself, oh, will I be part of the 10% or will I be part of the 42-42? And I think the stats should give you your answer.
And the stats are not what I represented them to be. What I thought they were is wrong. And Casper, I'm assuming your stats are recent.
Yes.
Do I have to like them?
No.
That's why.
But it's obvious if you're voting for somebody who has no chance in hell to win, then you're definitely giving your vote to the opposition if you're not voting deliberately against them. With the person who has the chance to beat them.
You don't have to like it. You have to dislike it the least.
Correct. So anyway, that was me chiming in, which I seldom do, but you asked, and I know the situation, and there you go. Next question.
Keep in mind, our next president is going to appoint likely more than one and maybe as many as 2 or 3 Supreme Court justices for lifetime appointments. And
I know, but that wasn't your question. Your question was, do you piss your vote away with somebody who you know just has no chance in hell to win and consider it a vote for the opposition, or do you go in there and vote directly against the person you want to lose?
I was going to let Richard off the hook, but Richard, this is a reality show. This is reality.
Okay, the reality show is Trump is a fucking idiot and vote for Hillary.
Okay.
I shouldn't have said that one word, but it's the truth.
No censorship on our network, don't worry.
I would have been surprised at a different conclusion. I appreciate the direct answer. And I've come to the same conclusion. I don't have to like it. And I'll tell you something else. The fact that I personally find her to just not be a terribly likable person. First, I don't know what she's like in person. And second, I don't give a shit if she's likable. Is that a important trait? Well, I can think of many world leaders that would say, you mean I even need to think about that? Are you stupid? The question is, can she do the job? And I guess the answer may be, well, the bar is pretty low.
Well, the bottom line, look at the 2 conventions. Last week, all I heard was hate. I have yet to hear that this week. That says something right there.
Did you hear Michelle Obama's speech?
Yes, I did. I thought it was one of the best speeches I've heard in my life.
I agree. Say again, please.
I said I wish she was running for president.
I've heard that. I would vote for her. She sets a great example, but you know what? She's too smart. Would you want that job? If
No.
they came to me and said, please, I would say, can I put that on my website that you asked me? Oh, by the way, the answer is, you out of your friggin' mind? But can I say you asked me?
I honestly don't know why anybody would want that job, which says just to be a presidential candidate, you may be mentally ill to begin with.
Well, that's a real problem. I did learn something watching the first Republican debate. I never knew that God was Republican. He's been preempted by the Republicans.
Well, anyway, let's not focus on the presidential election, because if we do, we won't be able to replay this next year, the following year, and I even try to remove what is called current content from conversations so that we can replay the shows over and over, and our audience has the opportunity to listen and benefit from our recorded discussions. And if we're sitting here talking about Trump and Hillary, I can certainly tell you 3 months after the election, no one's going to want to hear this show.
What I think we can comfortably say is that whatever issues are floating around, People interested in being activists need to remain current, educated, active. The issues will change. The overall process will not. So you pick your issues depending on what's going on. Whatever decade, there will be issues. And issues are like poison. Pick a little bit goes a long way. Drug issues. How does the Coast Guard get involved in that? What's the tie-in?
Well, they're supposed to be protecting the people, the boundary of the United States, the international waters. That's how both Customs and the Coast Guard gets that tie-in. And for up until 1920 or so, the U.S. government ran on excise taxes, not income taxes. So, and that Customs was the oldest federal agency out there to raise revenues for the government. And that's what ran the government for 200 years, that and selling public land. We didn't have an income tax until the 1920s.
Now the show is turning tragic. That was an attempt at humor. So, when in all fairness, again, the Coast Guard is out on their mission. Are they, and we're talking past now because everything in this world, this drug world, is changing so fast. Was there any priority given to drug interdiction, or was it just one more item on the list, along with looking for people in life preservers and capsized boats, whether it was spotted by the P3 or reported or radioed in? How did it fit in with the priorities?
Yeah, a lot of your federal agencies suddenly discovered, like after 9/11, they discovered an anti-terrorism mission. In the mid-1980s, when Reagan kind of revitalized the war on drugs, all these agencies discovered an anti-drug mission. And what it got them was money, bottom line. Customs went from 2 or 3 small airplanes to patrol the border here in the Southwest, citations and Blackhawks and P3s. Same thing happened with the Coast Guard. The Navy added some of their equipment, even though the Navy was never really involved in drug interdiction. It's one of their secondary missions, but they got equipment out of the budget that, because it had a secondary mission of drug interdiction, they added it to their, to the fleet. Just like after 9/11, suddenly the National Park Service had an anti-terrorism unit. So, it's where the money is.
So you're telling me that our military, which we're told by many is in need of expansion and modernizing, is using resources to fight this war on people. Can't war on drugs. You can only war on people, and frequently on our own people. You're telling me that our U.S. Navy has as a secondary mission the war on drugs? You really said that?
Yeah, I said that. If it's not that they may go purposely out and look, but if they're there and a submarine full of drugs comes by them, they're certainly going to take steps to stop it. Granted, the primary U.S. Customs, Coast Guard are the primary interdiction agencies, but the U.S. military is certainly there, especially in all through the Central America and the Andean Ridge nations.
Well, there we have to, I'm being sarcastic here, it's my nature. We have to be down there because from day to day we don't know which side we're on. So we really need the eyes on the ground in Central America.
Well, yeah, again, that's true, although actually whether we need all these military all over the place is a whole different issue. But we're directly supporting governments do the war on drugs all through Central America. In fact, we probably put some dictators in power because of their views on drugs or because they'll let us prop them up, and the rest of their country probably hate these people. And it's not the first time. Ask Noriega if this was the first time we've ever done that. The Colombia, incredible, beautiful country. It looks like they're finally getting things worked out with the FARC, and we're still down there flying crop dusting. Just try and stop them from growing cocoa plants. You talk about a waste of money.
So my understanding is not only can they crop dust and kill off coca plants, but they're not selective, and it does, if I have this right, two things. They're not using spray that turns to a harmless salt in less than 24 hours and we can use on our tomatoes. They're using chemistry which ruins the soil for a period of time and, oh, by the way, kills everything in the area, not just coca plants.
Yeah. And it's a well-paying job. I was offered that job after I retired from customs, just like I was offered a chance to fly in Iraq or Afghanistan in intelligence gathering for $25,000 a month. But no, thank you.
$25,000 a month sounds like $368,000 a year, give or take.
Well, you stay on an Army base, and the mission was actually rather interesting. It was like to fly, we have ground penetrating radar in those airplanes so we can see the IEDs on the convoy routes.
Ooh.
But I have a friend, went through federal law enforcement training with me in Glencoe, Georgia in 1986. He retired the same time I did. He took one of those jobs, and guess what? He hit a predator in Afghanistan at 4 o'clock in the morning and died. And 5 other people on his airplane died.
I'm thinking drones, same electronics. When are we
That's
going
right,
to see drones?
Those lights, they fly at night with no lights.
I wonder how drones are going to pop up in the war on drugs.
Well, they're already being used on the southwest border to replace some of the manned customs aviation patrols. And they're also being used on the southwest border to support Border Patrol units on the ground with remote cameras and infrared. So my question is obviously so far we've done a pretty successful job of not letting them hit an airplane. But the day's still young. That's actually what I wonder about more so than some of the other stuff with drones. Again, because my friend hit one descending into Kandahar Air Base at 4 o'clock in the morning. And it killed him, his co-pilot, and 2 other people on the aircraft.
Hitting a large military-type drone?
Yeah, probably a Predator. Probably a specific type called a Predator. For one thing, when you lose radio contact with those drones, they go into a racetrack pattern called a delta pattern at a certain altitude until they can reestablish radio contact with their operator. So how? Again, this guy, good friend of mine, he left behind his son was a freshman in college. I don't think it was worth $25,000 a month.
No, it's hard to put a value on life, but when one must. It's really sad when the conclusions are, yes, it's worth the money to risk my life for no good reason that will accomplish nothing for anybody. Oh, man. And it's such a common decision. Of course I'll take the money. Can I sell a kidney while I'm at it? But more and more, and this does remind me of Vietnam, more and more, the population is saying, this is not our priority. We don't see what's being accomplished. We don't see that we're winning. Why do we continue to do this? And by the way, bad things are happening. And I'm seeing that more in the populace. And I have great faith in the politicians to do exactly what they need to do to get votes and money.
Well, and we are down to the last of the couple of minutes here on the big broadcast, but I can certainly tell you that smoking marijuana not only is a way of preventing crime, it's a way of making people happier as well. I say preventing crime. Police officers say that they'd rather show up at a place where people are smoking marijuana than where they're drinking because there's no fights. And I can certainly tell you that marijuana does prevent crime. I was going through a divorce, and I was saying, should I divorce her or should I kill her? Should I divorce her or should I kill her? And I sat down and smoked a joint, decided to just divorce. No, just decided to divorce her. So with that said, marijuana saves lives. There you go. So we thought we would give an opportunity for everybody to give a shout out to their favorite URL or organization that they want to put a spotlight on. And we'll start with our guest first, and then we'll go to our joint host second.
No, just keep reading and I would say to any of your voters or any of your listeners, just figure out who's on first and make your appropriate choice in November.
And Lenny?
Well, it's going to be an easy choice that won't feel good. Check out My Canary app. One word, mycanaryapp.com. We have come up with an iPhone app to help somebody that chooses to be a responsible lathe operator, table saw operator, driver, whatever, to help them see objectively what their reaction time is, what their own balance is, and not with bullshit, pardon my language, bullshit chemistry that tells us nothing useful, except perhaps in the state of alcohol, without the painkiller mixed in, without the tokes mixed in. mycanaryapp.com.
And I want to remind people that we are a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week, all cannabis, all the time broadcasting network found on iHeartRadio. And like a good joint, we are always best when you share it.
Hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Right now, it's time for hell.
Free? Did you say free? Free hemp? Free hemp? Free hemp video and audio? Free downloads of all the top artists, all the pot artists on planet Earth. Interviews with all the people making the movement, making the hemp movement. It's time for hemp. That's right, world. It's time for hemp. That's right, world. It's time for hemp.